term type things, and I'm going to actually ask for you guys to interpret what this means for you before I say anything about what I think it means. So wait time, redirection, and checks for understanding. What's wait time?
Wait for them to respond after they give their first answer so you can see if they have anything else to add, because that kind of absence of you immediately jumping in gives them more time to talk, which is a representation of thinking.
Yeah.
She pretty much nailed that.
We talked about last night in class.
What it's, I'm sure pretty much any peer leader in this room can agree to that, because it's like half the battle is being able to fight those awkward silences. Because you don't want to tell them the answer. So you just gotta wait till somebody finally coughs it up. So.
It's no easier when you're an instructor.
I bet,
It's
yeah.
the same thing. Yeah, you just.
So there's our wait time, there's our long awkward moment. I'd say that's a great answer, and that ties back into, for my SI training, we call it wait time 1 and wait time 2. So not only the first wait, where you wait for the student to respond initially, but also the second wait, and that can be with the one-on-one student, just like, was it, not Ainsley, Ainsley's back there, so, sorry. Shannon, okay, that was going to be the second guess. So, like Shannon said, you want to hear everything that the student has to say, but also this can be really useful in groups. How many of you work with groups of students at a time? Peer leaders sounds like close to SI facilitators. Neat. So wanting to hear from more than one person. Good. Okay. How about redirection?
Not necessarily saying no if an answer is wrong, but trying to kind of guide them to the right way. Like not shaming them and being like, no, you're wrong. Trying to be like, well,
All right. Well, what else?
I mean, along with that redirection could be putting them back on topic. That's what I would assume, because students, I've had several students that did both in tutoring and reading sessions that will just start talking about stuff, and then it slowly but surely becomes more and more irrelevant to what's at hand. So it's just being able to use your skills to redirect that back to where it needs to go.
Okay.
I mean, I think of redirection as if they ask me a question, I ask it back and see if anybody else in the group can answer it. And if not, you kind of scaffold down. So you start with a more simple question that they might know the answer to and kind of build up to the question that they're actually asking.
Yeah, I love that
Mentioned
actually.
in our training.
Yeah, I really love that.
Huh?
Dr. Redmond mentioned that in our training moment. It's been like 3 years since I took the class.
Well, I mean, yeah.
But that's part of the
Yeah.
ITDS course.
It is, and that's how I do my math stuff, because a lot of the time they'll ask questions and none of them will know, so I'll be like, okay, well, what's step 1?
Mhm.
And we'll start from there and go up.
Other thoughts on redirection? Good. I think all of that was great. The only other thing I could think of that I didn't hear was also use of resources is a great thing to add to that too. So if they don't have the information in their own heads yet, and if they can't ask their peers for support, what other, do they have notes that they can use or a textbook that they can refer to, things like that, because that's a good way for them to build the skills to do it independently. Cool. But you guys answered all the top things that I wanted to hear about that. How about checks for understanding?
I feel like that's self-evident.
A little bit. You're right. So at some point later on, we have a check for understanding that we'll give to you guys, and we can kind of use that as a little bit of a model for when we do that. So those are just some more things to have floating around. I'm really glad you guys sound like you're really strong on all of those already. So this is where I get to be a little bit of a motivational, metaphorical speaker, if I haven't already been that. I really like neuroscience, and I am very inspired by how language works in the brain, things like that. So when I'm thinking about learning and tutoring, oftentimes I'm thinking about what's happening on the neurological level. How are we strengthening the synapses in the area of the brain when we're thinking about science or math or things like this? So when we as tutors say, you missed an article here, you need to use the article the there, or some plenty of different, insert your own example from your own discipline into that. But when we say, okay, this is the fact, this is the information that you need, here it is, take it. We are missing a great opportunity for the students to rely on their own knowledge, a great opportunity to activate that prior knowledge and to have them recall. So I talk about this in our Writing Fellows training with my mentees as sort of the question, where does the spark begin? Do you light that spark in your brain as a tutor and have this piece of information and then pass the torch after it's already been lit? Or do you inspire the student to light their own spark so that they're able to strengthen those synapses recall it more. The stronger, it becomes stronger the more you recall it, the more opportunities that you have to bring that information up from within. So that's something that by using these questions that we have, which you guys are about to come up with some questions, we can help them to be able to rely on themselves in the future as well. So with that, here's our activity. Transform your statements into questions that can help the student inspire that spark from within.
If you can.
And if you
Can turn that statement into a question.
And it's okay.
Sometimes you can turn it into a request for information.
Mhm. Yeah.
Maybe if it's not necessarily a question.
Are we supposed to save them or are we supposed to write them down?
Oh, write them first on another sticky note.
Yeah,
and
if you
then
put
we're
them on
gonna do
another
some sharing.
sticky if you can, and then we can discuss those. I've heard that name before.
Very cool. I haven't had my hands on things.
Why is it familiar? I'm not even into all
I was not speaking this professor.
Okay. I know I've heard that name. Yeah, she'll eat that up.
Not write statements, but these are, that's what you look like you guys feel like.
I can't do that.
Yeah, but if I say.
Oh, it's fine. We, have decided ours are kind of.
Yeah, you'll take one because we're gonna take
Transfer your statements into questions towards them like mine. It's just pointing out like yours are helpful. And then you can just slow down.
It's hard to kind of
Slow down, you just
There
be
was, it's kind of interesting. But it is. Most of the time, it will get better. You can probably
Next step, Corey.
That's my next step.
And Monday I was scared. And then
Like, I can't count. We use equations to count genetics.
I'll give you credit.
1 plus 1, 1 plus 1 plus 1.
She's like, okay.
Just X plus 1 over
N times N plus 1 over 2.
Good job. I'm sure they have something.
So you think everybody's about ready? You need a few more minutes?
Can we share, so when you, statements that you turned into, did you tell us a statement and tell us how you were able to turn it into a question? Anybody who wants to go?
This one's more physics related. It's electrons are like water in a pipe. If you put more in, you push others out. And then I rephrase that as, why do you think electricity flows instantly? What electron properties do you think would cause this?
Okay, awesome, okay. There's a reason for this, we'll tell you in a second, but yeah, so anybody else, were you able to turn a statement into a question or a request for information?
So I didn't read the instructions clearly, I guess, because I wrote it as a question to begin with.
Oh, that's fine, but no, that's totally cool, that's okay. So what question did you come up
So a little bit of context, I do student teaching.
with?
Um, So we had a question where it asked the students like what the relationship was between two different, it was like of a line, like what was the relationship between the cost of something and something else? So pretty much none of them could answer the question. So when we were going over it, I asked them what word did they learn the week before to represent relationships between two different variables. I was looking
Okay.
for slope.
And, okay, yeah, and
So
that's,
once I asked them that way, they were like, oh, we talked about slope. And I was like, okay, so how do you find the slope?
these are perfect examples.
I do like
Thank you
that.
for That's like a
Jen
perfect,
said
yeah,
earlier
example.
About kind of feeling your way down until you reach the point that
Yeah.
you have the solid ground and then building up from there.
That is a perfect example of that. So what are some others that you were able to turn into questions?
I mean, I essentially did the same thing as her, but not with finding slope, but instead finding what limits the domain of a function. Because it's starting with, okay, do you know these rules? And it's like, okay, so you don't know these rules.
Okay, so what do you know about this? Yeah.
Okay, so but do you know this rule that's
Right, do you know
that-
this one?
Yeah,
Right,
and
that-
so
yeah,
yeah,
which is
it was earlier today. You saw me doing that with that girl, and yeah. So because in the NPL lab, that's essentially most of what we do is starting from the ground up with a lot of people
Okay.
and building their knowledge.
That's good. So you see how this is both helpful for the student and that you're giving them that opportunity to start the spark within. But you're also knowing your learners better. You're able to get a sense of where they're at so that you can meet them there and help scaffold at the right level. Cool. All right. Others?
A lot of times I just kind of say, what does this remind you of, or what does this look like? Because there'll be some
I
things-
absolutely love that. Go ahead.
Well, no, but some things like, at some point, for whatever reason, teachers will go from using y to using f of x, but they never stop to explain what f of x means. And so when a student later sees p of c or anything other than f of x, they're like, I don't know what that is. And so whenever I'm like, okay, well, what does it look like? It looks like this other thing, right? You do the exact same thing, it's just different letters now. And then kind of going in, and I'll find like, if I explain f of x is this, f is the name of a function, so I'm like, okay, this function is Bob. Now we're gonna do, and things like that, and so normally that'll help just because it's the same thing, like you go back to something they already know, and they're like, oh, I know how to do that, I just don't know what this thing is right here.
I like that you also use Bob in your tutoring examples because I do too.
Pretty much, if I can make them laugh at something I say, I will say something stupid enough to make someone laugh. I'm determined.
Nice. All right.
So does anybody else want to share a statement they turned into a question? Or a question that they didn't have to turn into a question? Did anybody have trouble doing that?
Yes.
Okay, kind of had to.
There are certain things that I've used that I've tried saying it as a question and it doesn't, like for example, one of mine is, a lot of times I'll tell people to think about money because
Mhm.
they understand how to do things with money, but then when it comes to math, they freeze up. But I've tried saying like, how would you do this if this were money, or how would this, and they just kind of look at me like I'm crazy.
Okay, we can,
So-
yeah, I can get, sometimes, yeah. So a lot of you already did, I love some of the questions that you asked, like they're like dead on, right? So for people who are already doing that, already employ that a lot, right? That's awesome. People who aren't employing it, all the time, think about it, right? And I can tell you why it's a good thing. So that type of talk, if we want to go to our next one, that type of talk activates prior knowledge, okay? And that helps with that transfer into the situation. And that's one of the ways that you can do that. Because and you just pointed out in several great examples, sometimes people are just sort of just overwhelmed by the new situation, right? And you have to go, slow down. So tell me what you know about whatever, right? That, something that simple, right, can activate the prior knowledge, which is what we want to do, right? So asking questions or drawing explicit similarities, like you said, between previous and new concepts. These are some examples, and we tried to, it doesn't always have to be a question. It can be like an open-ended sort of request for information. Tell me what you know about writing for psychology, right? You might want to engage in an open-ended dialogue. Tell me what you know about thesis statements. Rather than, a thesis statement is this, right? So you always want to activate that prior knowledge, and I think y'all are pointing out some just really great, brilliant examples of, like you called it down scaffolding, and you can also fit that into activating prior knowledge. So this is why it's a good reason to do that whenever you can. That does help with that transfer into the new situation.
So back to reverse tilt. Now that we've activated prior knowledge, we're getting to know our learners, we've scaffolded some. We as tutors are there to also help a little bit on the side of feeling. We talked about, coming in overwhelmed, things like that. Sometimes, going back just a little bit, you can also say, how do you feel about thesis statements? Because oftentimes what they know about thesis statements and how they feel about thesis statements, that will reveal something totally different. So we know that instructors are not trying to trick their students. Sometimes students don't know that. So they come in and they bring that to us and they say, what do I do? They're out to get me. Like, no, they're not here. Let's unpack it together. So Tilt inspires students to re-envision from the instructor's perspective. We kind of think about it like, that moment in Wizard of Oz where they're drawing back the curtain to see, the bonus perk of that is you're opening a stronger dialogue between the student and instructor, because the student, by putting themselves in the perspective of, well, if I were an instructor, what would I want from this? Then they're thinking a little bit more along the same lines. They start to realize they're more approachable than they maybe at first thought. One quote that we had after the philosophy class, it was one of those multi-step interview partner then talked from their perspective about this issue type assignments. She said, so I'm not just writing what my partner said in the interview, I'm not transcribing it or anything. I'm writing from her perspective and supporting her argument with evidence as well as I can. I should go talk to her more so I can get a better understanding of why she feels this way. So she actually ended up realizing that she could learn more from her partner if she went back now that she had unpacked and tilted that assignment. So here's a picture of a reverse tilt workshop in action. This is with my grammar class from a couple of semesters ago, or my grammar SI group for the class that I was assigned to. So what we do is we take the instructions for the assignment and we put it on the smartboard, and then we use this one I didn't get to do the color coding with, but the next one you'll see I did, where they'll match the purpose color on both the whiteboard and the smartboard so they can cross off sections of the prompt as they go. And then they come over here and they summarize it a little bit more. Sometimes they put it into their own words, which can really help again with that metacognizing it and putting it into familiar terms for yourself. But all I had to tell them for that was, can you identify purpose, which is skills to practice and knowledge to gain, task, what you do and how you're going to do it, such as maybe a list of steps, and criteria, what excellence looks like or what success looks like, maybe a checklist or a rubric for self-evaluation. That's all I had to tell them. I didn't have to explain everything that you guys are hearing about till today, but then they were able to extract it out and figure out how do we think about this in a way that's more manageable. And then here's where I did this. This was just 2 days ago with same class, different semester. They had just gotten their test results back, and we were also about to start on the project. So I did one of those feeling assessments, and I said, draw a face on the board to represent how you feel about the test and the assignment. You can tell we have one artist who drew that kind of zombie-looking guy in the corner. But so that was to get started, and I ran out of time toward the end. I did not get to get them to draw their faces after we tilted it. I wish I had that to show you, but they did look physically better as they walked out the door. So they did the same exact thing where we went through. This one was a little more color-coded, and they just continued sort of unpacking that assignment. So why do we do all this, Dr. Jenkins?
So this is something that's connected. This is another scholarship of teaching and learning principle. You may have heard of this before, and if you have, that's great. We'll just kind of review it and see how we can connect it to the other things we talked about. But and I think we all kind of know that it's important to know how you feel about something, right? Can lead to success or not. So if you've ever read anything about growth mindset, Yeager and Dweck, particularly Carol Dweck, popularized this idea. Generally, it comes down to two mindsets, right? It's a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And the fixed one is sort of the what everybody.
Writer.
Yes.
I can't do math. I'm
Yeah,
an English major.
Right. It's that kind of talk, right, that gets internalized, and which honestly, at a certain point, kind of everybody did kind of believe that. You're either good at math or good at this or whatever, or you're, and if you are good at one thing, the implication is you're not going to be good at other things, right? Because everything's finite, right? There's only so much to go around. But what they're trying to get across is that, and I'll give you an example. I have always considered myself terrible at math, just terrible at math, chemistry, anything like that. Like you show me the stuff and I can't really. It just looks like shapes, But I will say that when I was in high school, I had a really good math teacher who slowed things down and scaffolded things for me or whatever, and I did fine. You know, did I become a math major? No, but I didn't have to. I got better and I could succeed at it, right? So it's not necessarily that you know, some of us, some people, almost everyone is kind of born good at something, and that's fine. That doesn't mean you can't get better. That doesn't mean that other people can't get better at things, right? That's the whole idea behind growth mindset. So there are ways that you can, has anybody ever heard about this before? Have you read that? Okay. So you probably had some training in it or something, or yeah. What did you take away from the growth mindset ideas?
Growth mindset is just, I guess, a way of thinking about it, that you can do everything and not like restricting yourself.
Mm-hmm. You just really, you know, just the idea that you don't necessarily just give up, right? And I'll tell you what's interesting about it too is it can be dangerous for people who are, you know, who have some sort of aptitude at something already, right? And they've always been told that they're great, right? It's not necessarily, it goes both ways. It's not necessarily you tell somebody, well, you're just not good at math, right? Right, and that inhibits their success. You can also inhibit somebody's success by telling them they're awesome at something. Because then what happens is, let's say, in writing, right? The first time they encounter some sort of writing task or something that's unfamiliar, difficult, whatever, the research shows those people who've been told that they're prodigies all their lives just give up. Because they're like, I found the thing that I can't do. Does that make sense?
Even if your students are great, you don't want to put a ceiling on that by saying, oh, you're great, you've done the best job possible, right? You want to let them know that there's still room to grow.
Yeah. So let's look at how we can sort of foster that.
Can I add another
Yeah,
example?
please add
too?
anything.
So one of my two examples actually. One is more of a personal anecdote on my own development as a student, and then one is something that I'm frequently coming up against with my students. So many students in the writing center, I'm sure this happens with math and other subjects as well, come in and they say, I'm such a bad writer. Oh, I've never wrote well in high school, so I don't really expect to do too well here. I just want to get it done. Blah, blah, blah. And you want to nip that in the bud as quickly as you can, because you don't want them to be self-deprecating as like a habit. Instead, what I then will present to them is, well, wait a second. If you were on your first day as a swordsmith's apprentice, would you expect to be able to go in on day one and make a perfect sword that's just as good as the master sword? No, you'd have a couple like bendy, weird ones that make some weird noises, not quite, like you want them. But the longer you spend in practice, just like with any other hobby, any other skill, you have to exercise it. You have to work up to that level. And so I try to give them that little, parallel to say you're gonna be working on it for a while. You're gonna go, bronze, silver, and then gold in terms of your mastery, all of that. But it's gonna take some time, and that's the master had to do that too. So remind them of that when they're feeling down. So I had to sort of take a spoonful of my own medicine after a while, because I decided to add a second major, which is a lot more mathematical and scientific than my English degree was. And back before I was the facilitator for that grammar class who you saw pictures of, and when I was in that class, I made the joke at one point, oh, I don't math. I'm an English major, I don't math. And that way, the professor, Dr. Parrott, came back and made jokes a couple semesters later about, oh, well, Shay doesn't math, and everybody, haha, funny. But then I added my double major, and I had to take quantitative methods for psychology. And I said, and I also had to take pre-calculus for that major too. And both of those classes, I said, you know what, I've had training in growth mindset. I can't be sitting here telling myself I'm bad at math. I have to live by example and I can't just spoon it out to everybody else and not drink it myself. So I said, okay, I'm going to do this. I came out top of my quantitative methods class last semester. And that's something that I'm trying to kind of tell my students about, not to brag, nothing like that, but just to say, hey, this can happen. Even if there was a point where you didn't believe in yourself, you can get there. Just remember that there is that room to grow always. So, yeah. Here's your table.
Oh yes, here's a table we like to show people. So that you've got the entity theory, which is the fixed mindset. That's just you are who you are. That's it. Can't be anything else. And then the incremental theory, right? You can just look at this table, and we'll send it later if you want to. And as I pointed out, like I said, it can be detrimental because people who have been told you're good at X tend to give up when the challenge is higher than what they've done, right? I think that's as bad as telling somebody, well, you're not good at math, and so then that person doesn't succeed. But notice that also that you have different goals, and I think this is interesting too. There are ways to foster this. I think the goals are really important. So with our fixed, right, generally the goal is, I'm already smart, I want to show how smart I am, right? Whereas if in the growth mindset, your goal is not to show how smart you are, it's to learn, right? It's to keep improving. And as it shows there, work harder and smarter. Notice about the changes in grades during times of adversity. I see this a lot, right? They decrease or remain low. But if you're committed to the learning, the other goal, your grades are going to increase even if you're encountering adversity. Because you're not just saying, I am at one level, I will always be at this level forever, and that's it, right? So there are ways to foster this too that I like. And a lot of this comes down to motivation, right? And we noted Pentrick before, and Yeager and Dweck have a quote here on motivation. But you want to represent challenges as things that people can take on and overcome with time and effort, right? New strategies, learning, help from others, and patience. That's a lot of the things that you would provide. That's why what you do is important. Because a lot of times, for one reason or another, you're not going to get those sorts of that sort of help from other sources, right? So, sometimes the professor's way too busy and, doing their own thing to foster this. So it's a way that you can actually encourage this. So what you do is like really important. So then we have some other ways to do that. All right, here's one thing that I like particularly. Avoid grade prediction. I bet you all already. I mean, just on a practical level, it's you don't want somebody coming back, right, and just throwing some assignment at you and why didn't I get an A like you told me? I mean, on a pragmatic level, you don't do that, but also on sort of a more theoretical level, you want the student to focus on the learning rather than that show how smart I am goal, right? One thing that's also really important too is encourage achievable micro goals with people. And we've talked about that, how that feeds into the scaffolding, right? Where you can go, all right, you're not here yet, let's start back here, right? And micro goals, get them back up to where they need to be. One of my favorite, this is hard, this is really hard. It's hard to do with yourself, it's hard to do with other people. Praise effort, not intelligence or talent, right? So I don't ever tell anybody anymore, ever, I don't think to myself that I'm a good writer. By all rights, I ought to be. I do not think that. Okay, I have to always retrain myself. Don't think of yourself as a good writer. Here's why. There's some stuff I do okay, right? But if you throw some sort of piece of, I don't know, business writing at me or something, or a lab report. I haven't done a lab report in forever. I am suddenly not a good writer, to be honest with you, okay? So a lot of this is contextual. I would have to work hard to get good at the lab report. Do you see what I'm saying? So I don't even praise my own intelligence or talent or anything. And so it can be, and again, it can be detrimental when you're telling somebody, hey, you're a really good writer, you're a really good writer. It sets up this expectation. So then when they find something that's challenging, then they just like, oh man, I don't understand this, I will give up. I've seen this happen. I've literally seen that happen with people. And again, we don't want to tell anybody, one way or the other. This is an important strategy too, and I think y'all have talked about this. So you can suggest to people attempting, especially if you work with people over time, this really works, attempting more sophisticated tasks over time to challenge them, rather than have them stay at that certain point where they are. And I'll give you an example from writing. I mean, you might want to, let's say, work with somebody on several papers, right? You may want to at some point suggest, hey, why don't you play around with how you do conclusions? Something simple like that. The person has reached a level of proficiency, right, where you're like, hey, why don't you try something a little bit different, right? You can also emphasize purpose and audience. These are two of my favorite things to do, and we've talked about that. And Shay's favorite.
Almost meta tutoring, right? Have you ever had to tutor yourself through your own homework?